Well, hello, Browns fans. This is the gang of three. We have all assembled here tonight to talk about that narrow Patriots 32-13 win over the Cleveland Browns, primarily thanks to a disastrous third quarter, and particularly on the part of the so-called Cleveland Browns offense. Pete Smith, how you doing tonight, sir?
I'm all right. Better than they are. Also less bruised.
Lane, are you likewise less bruised?
A wonderful Monday.
Yeah, it's just another Monday at the OBR. 25 years of this. We've been doing it on non-victory Mondays, and we've got a lot to talk about here. If you are tuned into the program via Slack, YouTube, or Twitch, then you are live on our comment screen. We can see what you say in the chat room comments, and we will cater to those questions because they're better than my questions. So we will, at the very least, get back to the questions that you have as quickly as possible. So please feel free to fire them up, and we will go from there. All right. So, guys, we got a few things to talk about concerning the Cleveland Browns. Let's get into the offense. I would really like to say that let's talk about Myles Garrett and the 5 sacks and the good news, but you got to deal with the problems first, and the offense is definitely a problem, starting with the running game. Quinshon Judkins finished with 9 runs for 19 yards. Now, we know that Quinshon Judkins can produce when given the opportunity. But the question I have, and I'll start with you tonight, Pete, is whether we blame his lack of production on the lack of push and holds developed by the offensive line, or are we pointing more to just the fact that opposing teams can sort of stack the box and move their safeties up and just aren't threatened about downfield passes? Is it one or the other, or is it both?
Well, I mean, the answer is always both. Look, if they had 5, if they had 5 great linemen, and tight ends and everything, they could, brute force their way down the field, but they don't. And at some point, I can't blame the line as much as they are flawed. I can't say to the line, you have to be able to block 8 guys with 5. Like there comes a point where you're just going to lose because the opponent doesn't care about your passing game, and they can tee off and everything else. And when they're doing that, you're helpless. I mean, there's only so much they can do. I mean, the whole point, you want to stay on the script, you want to be able to stay on schedule and do all these things, is to put the defense in a position where they don't know what's coming and they have to think about everything. But when they don't care and they're just going to pin their ears back and say, we're going to deal with this, you're at a huge disadvantage, and it changes everything else on the offense.
Yeah, Lane, same question to you. Do you perceive it the same way?
Well, if you look at this game, and it's pretty relatively simple. New England played their base defense 3/4 of the time during that game because they had absolutely no respect for the Browns offense, for the Browns passing game, for the Browns ability to block at the point, especially when you get out, when you need tight ends and wide receivers to block. They just annihilated them. And it's just the usual thing that we just about every week that goes on with this team. And their personnel doesn't get it done, whether they're not good enough. You definitely got issues at quarterback because you left all kind of plays on the field again. So we're back here Monday talking about the same things.
Yeah. Well, Fumble 13 wants to talk about the play calling. And I know that we've gotten a lot of questions about this in ATI and Ask the Insiders and elsewhere. But it does seem like the play calling is a bit predictable. First down is unsuccessful. Second down, always a run up the middle. You can book it. It seemed fairly predictable to me, other than a couple of maybe not so well-advised flea flickers. Pete, do you concur with that, or do you think it's just it's a matter of execution?
I mean, you get yourself in a tricky situation here because on the one hand, if they're unsuccessful on first down and they throw the next two, then everybody's going to complain that you don't run the ball enough. If you do exactly what he laid out and you say first down wasn't successful, he doesn't say run or pass, and then you run it on second down, then you're stupid because you're predictable for doing it. The bottom line is they aren't moving the ball. And if they were, no one would care how they do it. Because there have been situations where Quinshon Judkins has been good enough where it could be 2nd and 10 and he's going to pick up 15 yards. But the bottom line is when you are as ineffective as the Browns are, everything looks predictable because the defense doesn't care. And it really shrinks down what you can call, in part because you can't trust your quarterback to execute it, or he's not seeing what he needs to see, or he's not trusting what he needs to trust. The offensive line's at his disadvantage. And at some point, the running back's going to die if you just keep slamming him into cement walls, which is what, ultimately he left the game with a AC joint sprain. So that is sort of what you run into. Everything looks predictable when you suck. When you are, and take it for somebody who's been involved in this. We look, coaches look really good when you have really good talent, and you can call bad plays and have good enough players that can just fix it and make it work. And then you look like a genius. Likewise, you can drop the absolute perfect play and get the exact look of the defense. And when your guys don't execute it well, you look like an idiot, even though everything was perfect on your end, but you have to rely on the players to execute. And Kevin Stefanski, far from perfect, but there are any number of times where they have exactly what they want. They couldn't draw it up any better, and they still come back to the huddle unsuccessful because they aren't executing the play.
Right. Lane, how much do you pin on the play calling? Pete obviously says it's a combination of the play calling and the ability to execute. You agree with that, or are you willing to point the finger a little bit more at Stefanski's approach?
Well, you can always look and say that play calling is an issue when it doesn't work, just like Pete said. And there's various reasons why a play may not materialize throughout the entire process. This team has a problem executing the simplest of defensive scheme. So asking them to dial anything else up, like a couple quick plays, which were abysmal, it's the same story. And it's just it's a failure to execute, coupled with play calling that is, you could say, he has dumbed it down a bit because of the talent and the issues that they have. But there's one thing that we have to keep coming back to, is that everybody has enough tape to see that when the Browns go big, when they bring in extra tight ends or linemen for the blocking, and you just have guys walking up in the box and just filling gaps, and you continue to run into it because you aren't able to get over top of that. And it's going to continue on. And as long as we see these same efforts, same players, and same thought process materialize, we're going to see this as far as it goes. And there has to be a point where you as a head coach, or you as a general manager, you as an owner, have to say that this has been abysmal when you talk about offensive production for 8 games now. Yeah, and there's no other excuse to twist into this thing now. Yes, they're young. Yes, they're inexperienced. Yes, they have issues. And you want to see growth and development. The only problem is that you get growth and development in these little spurts, which is a natural thing. But the only problem is that now you're getting to the point, you sit there at 2-6, and you got guys who are frustrated 2 weeks ago, tasted a little success last week, so it was a little happiness. And now they're back worse than they were before the win in Miami, because that's how abysmal they looked against a team that they should have been able to attack through the air.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's no excuse, especially when New England's playing base. They're playing base most of the game. They showed no respect to the Cleveland offense. It was tragic. It was abysmal to watch if you sit back and watch this thing now.
Well, then you get into the whole thing of people say, well, you're being too cute. Meanwhile, the same people are also saying you need to innovate. Like you get caught in this stupid trap of, the bottom line is, if you're not moving the ball and you're not scoring points, it's just going to be whatever word you want to throw out there that just translates to bad offense. But like we saw the Browns try to execute a double pass. It didn't work. The Patriots did the exact same thing, and it did. And it like, are they innovating? Are the Browns not innovating? Like this is the stuff you have to deal with. So like on the one hand, and you're hearing this stuff in the press conference, which drives me insane, of basically, try stuff out as if that's how any team operates. Meanwhile, like they are trying to do different things. Like, for example, Malachi Corley's play was great. Like it was a great call. Like that's the type of stuff they can do. But like, to me, that's sort of illustrates just how hard this offensive staff has to work just to get anything going. It's really difficult. So like you're in this spot where, to Lane's point, you sort of have to be able to just out and grind through it and hope that somehow you're going to find success on the other side of this bye week against the Jets, even though the Jets are coming off a win this week. That at some point something's going to click. And I don't, this is one of those things where people are like, what do you do? I can't answer when this is going to happen because nobody can answer that. But at some point, you're hoping that something's going to click into place and they're going to get better. But scheduling that is incredibly difficult.
And you look at a couple of examples of it, in this game. They're talking about not having wide receivers that can create separation, or wide receivers making plays, or they got to get to the ball wide receivers earlier. And there's examples in this game, just as there have been just about every game here. He had Gage Leverdan run 3 really nice routes. Twice he was just clear. We get nowhere with it. Then we come back to Jabari Thrash, crosses the middle. And the safety was looking in the backfield, and he was behind him. Nothing. But the one play that just irks the shit out of me, and it's going to continue, is Gabriel feels pressure, rolls. Isaiah Bond is down the sideline. You just don't stop there, because when you get blown coverage like that and you have a 10-yard buffer, Bond has to turn that off to give him room to make the throw. Instead of this thing getting airmailed 2 yards out of bounds, and they get absolutely nothing, and they just look like the fools that they continuously look like every week. Those are the type of plays that you can't miss on. You can't blow. And you can point to inexperience and say, okay, Bond hasn't got that much. He hasn't played that much football. He didn't have a training camp, and that's all horseshit. Because if you're a wide receiver from the collegiate level coming into the pro game, you know what to do. And he gave Gabriel no room to make that throw. And Gabriel didn't make a good throw either. It's just another example of what goes on here. And forgetting that you've got a guy, Jerry Jeudy, running around here, and you're not even attempting to get the ball to him. There's plays called, and it's not getting to that point because you're dumping everything off. Everything is so quick, and it's not schemed for that. That's a quarterback issue. That's not the head coach. That's not the play caller. He's not calling this play for the quarterback to get to his back foot and then dump his stuff off. It's just impossible. But this is what we continue to see.
Well, this was my takeaway on Dylan Gabriel is, look, I like Dylan Gabriel in terms of how he handles himself. He says the right things. He seems very professional, focused, all those things. Off the field, it's easy to see why the team likes him. It's easy to see why teammates respect him. And he's a guy you can easily root for and say, yeah, I want to see him succeed. On the field, I don't see a strong case that he should continue to be the quarterback. And I don't know what Shedeur Sanders is or is not doing in addition to the fact he's currently hurt. So I'm not getting into that. I'm just looking at this, what I can see. Dylan Gabriel right now is not, to me, does not look like he's fighting like he has to win a job. He looks like he's playing in some ways as if the job is his no matter what. And I think that's a dangerous way. And I don't want him to sit here and play as if I make a mistake, Shedeur Sanders is immediately going to come in the game and I'm going to get benched, or if Bailey Zappi or whoever the hell it is. It could be Barry at this point. I don't care, but he's got to fight and play like he's trying to earn something, because if he's not going to do it, why should anyone else? Because there's so much with what he's doing. And I thought at the end of the game, I can't get into his head, but he looked defeated. He looked like he looked like he'd rather have been anywhere else at the very end of that game when he got called for that grounding penalty, when he had an open option. He stopped. I don't, again, it's difficult to get in the kid's head, but I just felt like he stopped competing at that point and was basically like, get me out of here. Let's hope we can do this again in 2 weeks. And that's very difficult to sort of watch. And I think there are a lot of things I think coaches can deal with. That's the stuff that I think is going to shorten the leash considerably, is when people can see on tape that it looks like he's not fighting for those guys, because then it's going to translate to receivers who say, why am I going to bother, because he's not going to give me a shot, or this, that, and the other. Like, there's too many elements of this where, I think Dillon Gabriel can be better. I think he will get better. But in terms of what the Browns need, and look, this is unfortunately life in the NFL. He's played 4 games. This last one to me was his worst, which is not the direction he wants to go. So it's got, Kevin Stefanski said he's going to go with them after the bye. Again, I'm not going to go with what I can't see. I'm going to go with what I can. He's got to be way more aggressive in terms of his mindset and just the fight he needs to showcase, because he has ability. You saw that on the script. You saw that to open the game. He can do some stuff. But unfortunately, once the game started to really get going, that fight just left him, and the Browns were just not doing anything on that side of the ball.
So when we look at these offensive problems, right, I spend a lot of my time on the forums at the OBR or talking to people or whatever. It sort of goes in 4 directions, right? The blame for the offense. Part of it goes on Stefanski. Some people blame him. They don't like the play calling. Some people don't like, how he schemes the offense. Wide receivers, offensive line, and quarterback, right? Dillon Gabriel, if I remember correctly, and I want to get off the quarterback and start talking about some other stuff too, but Dillon Gabriel, if I remember, was a pretty effective college quarterback. I watch a lot of Big Ten because I'm an Ohio State fan, which I've made known from time to time. And I watch a lot of Oregon games, and he was a very effective college quarterback, but he had an offensive line that would generally beat their opponents. They had very good weapons to throw to and all that sort of thing. But I guess my question to you, Pete, is why this massive drop-off from college to the NFL? He had 64 games in college. People were looking at him sort of like Bo Nix, as having a ton of experience and being able to come in and operate quickly. What's gone wrong in the jump from college to the NFL for Dillon Gabriel?
Well, it goes to show just how difficult it is to jump from the difference in talent from those 2 levels. But beyond that, it's disappointing that experience should translate more in his ability to sort of see the field and be more aggressive in what he's doing. That's, he looks like a guy who hasn't played much football right now, which is really problematic when that is your thing. Beyond that, I think the larger problem, and look, I think Dillon Gabriel can get better, but if you were one of the people who was critical of the pick, most of the reason you thought that way is because you didn't think there was much there in terms of upside. And Dillon Gabriel, to this point, whether it was college or the pros, he's been good. He was a good quarterback in college, but he didn't necessarily make guys better. He got them to whatever he was basically playing at the level the rest of the team was for the most part. You can be a good quarterback doing that, but that's really difficult given what the rest of the talent on the Browns looks like, because the playing at the level they are currently at isn't very good, and he's actually doing worse than that. So that is why so many people were hard on the pick. I wanted Kevin Stefanski to pick the guy he wanted. He did. That's fine. And ultimately, if Dillon Gabriel is a very good backup, great. But in terms of what they need right this second, they need him to be able to lift talent, and he's not doing that, and he's not giving them a chance either. So the 64 starts count for nothing right now because he's not showing any of that sort of experience when he's playing in the NFL.
Yeah, Carlisle makes a point. No one should care about QB right now. The starting QB for 2026 is not on this team. and doesn't understand why we're spending so much time talking about the quarterback position. Well, like Kevin Stefanski, a lot of people are saying Dillon Gabriel's the issue, and we're talking about some issues that Dillon Gabriel is facing here in his jump from college to the NFL. But two other things that we need to talk about. One is the offensive line. And, obviously either the opponent knows what we're going to do or we simply can't create those holes lane for the running backs. If you were to sort of guess at this offensive line's construction in 2026, how many of these starting offensive linemen do you figure are going to be back?
Mm-hmm. One, maybe two. I think there's a lot that's going to have to go on and have to rebuild when this season ends, and they're going to attack into free agency in the draft. You're hoping that you see enough out of Robinson that maybe he can be a worthwhile candidate to be back here. And you can look at somebody like a Tevin Jenkins, maybe young guy. You got to tackle the pick up from the Rams, who can really run block. You can't block where the way. So he's gaining experience as we go along here. You don't know what exactly is going to happen with Teller. He's been average. And
right.
Joe Antonio, who knows if you're going to see him come? He wants to come back another year, and he's still playing at a high level. And at center, I'm looking at Luke Whippler as being the heir apparent. I would like to hopefully see some of these guys at some point, other than coming in and just when the Browns are trying to get big up front.
Right. Same question to you, Pete. What do you see in terms of the change needed in the offensive line to start getting away from lack of execution, particularly in the running game?
Well, I mean, the offensive line isn't bad right this second. They weren't the reason the Browns couldn't move the ball. Right. Like for all the stuff, again, I can criticize the offensive line endlessly because they aren't very, they're average, to Lane's point, on their best day. But was Dillon Gabriel running for his life this whole game? He got sacked once, I think, in the entire game. It's not like he was constantly under pressure. He had opportunities to throw the ball and didn't do it. But, Lane sort of hit on where I think they're going to go. If Cam Robinson can prove to be an insurance policy, that's an excellent way to sort of prevent forcing a rookie to have to potentially step on the field. Tevin Jenkins, similar deal. You can sign both those guys potentially to one-year contracts and feel good about them, at least as insurance policies or competition until you find better answers. Luke Whippler certainly is somebody they hope can be that. And then, I'm certainly not going to sit here and go KT Levinston's going to be a starter. I think in a perfect world, he's going to be a much improved third tackle next year in the right situation. But the bottom line is free agency, the draft, they're going to have to make substantial investments in both. Obviously, free agency comes first. So if they could get one really good premium option there, that could fill one hole and get a good quality starter at a better age. That would set them on the right path because I do think the supply in the draft is that I think they can get this thing going. I sort of look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, unfortunately, who, used the first, second, and then fourth round picks on linemen in one draft, and they're all starting at this point and getting better. So, that's certainly not an easy thing to do, but the thing is with Andrew Berry and company, and I understand it on some level why Andrew Berry has done it to the point he's done it. He has taken, including Jed Wills, they've taken 4 offensive linemen in the draft since 2020. Compare that to the investment on the defensive line. And while I like Jim Schwartz, he is the squeakiest wheel possible. Now that wheel is running very well now, but he's very squeaky and demands plenty of oil. They've drafted 9 defensive linemen over that same time period, which now includes a second-round pick and the 5th overall pick. And look, I'm not going to hammer Jim Schwartz because I think those investments have been prudent in terms of getting the defense right. Like, I don't like where the offense is, and I think it needs to get overhauled in many ways with just substantial investment on that side of the ball. But I can't sit here and say that the investments the Browns have made defensively have been bad ones. They've been smart investments, and they are paying off. But the problem is, and again, this is not a criticism of Jim Schwartz. It's just he has literally gotten everything he could possibly want. Meanwhile, Kevin Stefanski has to carry that burden now, and it's really taxing this team. So, Kevin Stefanski, if he's ultimately fired, is going to be the nice guy who ends up being a patsy because he let the defense get all the resources or was involved in those conversations and sort of had nothing to show for it.
Yeah, we have a question from Carlisle. Obviously, quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver, a lot of needs. I think that Jim Schwartz is going to be disappointed this offseason because I think that the attention is going to be very much on the offense and restocking the personnel there. But Carlisle wants to know, and we'll start with you, Lane, you're looking at quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver. I might extend that to at least one offensive guard position as well. But which two of these would you pick to address first with the high draft picks?
Well, it all depends on what's on the board because you want to select the best player that you possibly can. But this team needs offensive line help. So offensive line and quarterback are absolute two positions that I'm looking at. It's going to depend on what I'm looking at when I get to free agency because I may be able to scroll into something to free agency across the offensive line that gives me the opportunity to do something else at quarterback or wide receiver. There's a lot of game to play before you get to that point. But it's obviously right here, those are three spots. And I won't just say offensive tackle. I'm going to say offensive line in general. That something has to be addressed. They have to upgrade talent. And it has to be in the plan because right now the situation is that you have a whole offensive line full of guys that are going to be basically out of here in a year. So they have no choice to get to the offseason and get into the trade market, get into free agency before they get to the draft. But all three of those positions that are noted or position groups are of critical need.
Let's start here. Guard is more important than tackle. Straight up, it is more important. It's just more difficult to find tackles, which is why they go early. But in terms of what the Browns need, it's guard. And they've shown you this time and time again. Where does the money go? Guard. They extended Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller multiple times. They have tried to make that last as long as possible. Obviously, it's falling apart at this point. But to the notion that Andrew Berry's resume sucks at offensive line, look, I get it with Jed Wells. I desperately wanted to pick Tristan Wirfs. In fact, at the time of the draft, when the Browns were on the clock, I basically called the shot thinking this, of course they'll take Tristan Wirfs. And they took Jed Wells. DeJuan Jones, it was a sensational rookie with incredible talent. He got hurt. For a fourth-round pick, it was a gamble based on some of the other stuff. People worrying about his focus and all this other crap. He played fine, but then he got hurt, and it's nature of the beast. As far as James Hudson third, he's been basically a fourth-round pick worth offensive lineman who's helped the Browns win football games. And then Zach Zinter is the one that I hate because they drafted him to play a scheme they played for 1 year and then immediately bailed on it. So, I didn't like the pick when it was made, but it's neither the Browns changed schemes, so they've got a guy that doesn't fit. Welcome to it. This is why one of the reasons why I desperately want to put the brakes for people, pump the brakes for people who go, I want to change everything because this is what happens. Look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They keep changing their front office. So what do? They traded Tank Bigsby for pennies on the dollar. He just ran for 109 yards on 9 carries for the Eagles yesterday. They trade Tyson Campbell for less because he doesn't fit their scheme anymore. He looks great for the Browns. And then whether or not it's real, they're at least discussing the possibility of shipping off Brian Thomas Jr., who everybody thought at the time, after his rookie season, was a sensational player. And if you do this over and over again, you constantly have to keep shipping these guys out because now you have to blow up the system or find new fits or whatever, all this other crap. This is why I would preach to be a little bit patient with this. As much as people are frustrated, and I get it, losing sucks. which, by the way, when Kevin Stefanski's asked about Myles Garrett slamming his helmet, that would have been my answer. Losing sucks. But this is the problem you sort of run into if you're constantly trying to change everything. So if you throw Jim Schwartz out with everything else, and suddenly if they bring in another guy and they go, well, hey, Mason Graham, I don't want you to play 295. I want you to be back at 325. Like, this is the kind of crap you run into. And now, or a guy comes in and says, I don't think Dylan Sampson fits my offense, or I don't like having a Harold Fannin in my offense. And now you have to get rid of guys because now you have to fit the new system. Those are the concerns I have. But I'm going to throw out the guy's question entirely. You can address all three positions if you want to. They have the assets. They have the ability to do it. But yes, I absolutely think guard is critical. And there's a guy I already love for this draft, and I'll see where he ends up getting drafted. He's playing tackle for Iowa. But Jennings Dunker is the exact type of football player I want on my football team because he's just an ass kicker with a relentless motor, exactly what you want for his own scheme, and plays at Iowa. If they're going to pick an Iowa, finally pick an Iowa lineman, I hope it's this one.
All right. Well, we'll hold on to that for the draft. Lane, heading over to you. Wide receiver. The point was made, I put it up on the screen, that do you trust Andrew Berry to pick an offensive lineman? And Pete made a case for, why, his picks may not have been as horrible as you thought. What about wide receiver? We haven't had much luck in that department either, and we certainly have not seemed to have coached them up once they come to Cleveland. Said Tillman's going to get another shot again. He at least brings some size, to the wide receiver room.
Right.
But, what do you think about the Browns' ability to draft and then coach up wide receivers? Because to me, it's been sorely lacking on both counts. We cannot hear you.
When is the last time seen the Browns draft a wide receiver that evolved into a productive, every down type of guy? They really haven't. I mean, Tillman has faced the injury bug endlessly. David Bell, same thing. Outside of those, who have they drafted? So Sitting here and looking at the Browns and thinking that they're just going to magically select the right wide receiver, you have to question it. The other thing is that where they've been in position to draft wide receivers, losing draft first round picks over a couple of years and having other needs and then missing on the guys they have selected, it raises questions. Were they on the availability they needed? Was it is it that they don't value it? And you can't say that they really don't value the position because Andrew Berry trades for receivers. If there's an opportunity there, it's fair. He's going to trade for the guy. So do I feel confident that they can or will pick the right receiver? History has shown me no to this point.
Yeah, track record is not very good. Let's move on to talk a little bit about the defense. Now that we're about a half hour into the show, we got a bunch of questions lined up too, so I want to jump to them. Pete, Travion Henderson carved up the Cleveland Browns defense, 7 runs for 75 yards. 4 other runners, including Drake May, added another 100 yards to that total. Seemed to me like Henderson was effective throughout, but it also seems to me like Josh McDaniels figured out something about the Browns defense and was able to orchestrate an effective offense for the Patriots in the second half. Is there, did you see the same thing, a change in tactic on the part of Josh McDaniels? And if so, what was it?
I don't know that there was necessarily a change in tactic. They were doing things well the entire game. The difference is the Browns were able to bow up in the first half and hold them to field goals, and in the second half they didn't. But a lot of those big plays, one, Josh McDaniels is as good at his job. He may be one of the worst head coaches of all time, but he's a damn good offensive coordinator. But there were a number of plays where the Browns had a guy fall down or some other, issue where it's not necessarily a scheme issue or, a mental error. it's just they played the play and things went wrong, and the Patriots capitalized. But the thing that Josh McDaniels does really well is he has been very good at attacking, particularly Myles Garrett, as a run defender. He will use, and this was true when the Browns played the Patriots the last time, they used wide receivers to crack and cut and do anything and everything to get defensive ends on the ground. And like they use crack toss a lot and were very successful. And having Trevion Henderson is a great fit for that because he's very fast. They block well on the outside. They have some receivers with some size who get after it. And especially once the Browns lost Campbell, they were in a world of hurt. Yep. I know Jim Schwartz likes Dom Jones. Dom Jones struggled, as you'd expect from an undrafted rookie. I think the other part of this is we saw a little bit more of the Browns trying to sort of widen the amount of things they can do, and you're going to run into some trouble with that. They were great against the Dolphins, and everybody's going to go, oh, man, we should do this all the time. I agree with that. I want them to push the boundaries and keep doing this stuff because if the Browns offense is going to continue to be as bad as it is, they might as well. If they can, to borrow Jim Schwartz's analogy, if Jim Schwartz wants to develop another pitch, why the hell not keep throwing those pitches and see what happens until you can figure some of this stuff out? So occasionally you get caught in these things and make mistakes, and the Browns need to learn and figure out what's going to work for them and what's not going to work for them. And there were some times where they got caught in some stuff. The Patriots took advantage. Last but not least, Drake May is phenomenal. Drake May is what every team wants to have. And even if you have a quarterback that you think is really, really good, let's use Washington as an example. Jaden Daniels is a fabulous quarterback. They're still going to use Drake May as a comparison to say, my guy as good as him, because every team wants that. The Houston Texans are sitting there thinking about, man, we might wish we had Drake May. The Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles going to lose his job at some point because he didn't take Drake May and made a joke out of that process by his handling of it. Now, we'll see if they can get Caleb Williams right. He's certainly extraordinarily talented, but just in terms of the quarterback position, Drake May is playing at an unreal level. And the funny part is the Browns game was his worst in the past month, and he still was great because he's been completing something like 80 and 90% of his passes and hadn't thrown a pick in a month. So that's the level he's currently operating on. So that's the challenge. Like the Browns were the best defense they faced all year. They got some early wins. The Patriots sort of ironed it out, and Drake May got better and better and better over the course of the game. He's very, very good. And the Browns are sitting there going, why can't we get one of those?
Yeah, exactly. So let's zoom back a little bit before we go to the questions and take a look at the big picture here. Obviously, the offense struggling would be the nice way to put it. Defense strong, but Myles Garrett getting very frustrated the other day. You don't know how much longer you're going to get, 110% effort out of the defense with the offense struggling like it is. I'm starting to take a look at the front office, right? The people who set up this offensive line, the people who set up these wide receivers, and the people who picked this quarterback. How are Jimmy and D, Lane? How are they going to react to being 2-6 at the bye and looking this bad? Will there be a temptation to?
Well, there's a reason why Aslan came out and made his comment a week ago about how the Browns played with Miami. They're tough and they're turning around and they know things are going to take time. Inside of there, they're not the happiest campers. They bought into what this process was going to be, and that's why you're seeing this continue on. And Jimmy Haslam not losing his shit because they're bought into it. They bought into the youth. They bought into what's happened in the past that has put them in some struggling positions financially or at a position. But the only problem is that there's also the embarrassing effect of seeing your team line up on any given Sunday and look like they are 30 seconds worst team in the NFL.
Right.
You don't know how long Jimmy Haslam is going to be able to take that
Yeah.
growth and development. And if you want to really sit back and look at this and be honest about it, through 8 weeks, how much growth and development have you really seen to the naked eye?
Mhm.
And that's what's going to matter in a lot of ways here when we look at this, the Browns team, as we get through the second season. Look at it in the to have struggles, and they expected to get better in the second. Now they're heading to the second half. Basically, in the first half was garbage. Let's see how Jimmy Haslam and D feel in 8 weeks when we're getting to the end of this thing and Huntington Bank Field is half empty.
Right. Right.
And the PR that's going to surround this team continues to be as mediocre as it has been. They have to show some growth and development. If they don't, nothing would surprise me when we get to the end of this year. So
Right.
something has to change that we haven't really seen yet.
Right.
The notion of the youth
Right.
movement is a romantic one. Everybody thinks it's going to be smooth and easy, and they're just going to get better, and it's going to be rough initially, and then people play it out in their head, and it's going to get better faster than it inevitably will be. The fact of the matter is they are getting better. It's just unfortunately not in a way you can really sell right now. They are committing fewer penalties. This is one of the issues that were the first month of the season. The Browns committed a ton of penalties. The last 2 games, they've been really disciplined on that front. In fact, this past game, they didn't commit a penalty the entire first half. And one of the 5 penalties they committed was Dylan Gabriel's stupid intentional grounding penalty. So they are getting better in those areas. There's some other small areas where I think the offensive line is getting better in part because it's getting healthier, but you are seeing improvement there. And they've got guys you can say are genuinely good. Quinshon Judkins is good. Harold Fannin is good. Those are things you can sort of bank on. Now, is any of that going to resonate with Jimmy Haslam if the team has 4 wins at the end of the year? I have no idea. But if he was willing to buy into this, I hope for his sake that he doesn't do what he did to Sashi Brown and basically decide I'm really into this idea and then pull the plug and basically screw over everybody who was involved because they told you exactly how it was going to go and you didn't like how it was going to go. And now you're sort of stuck. And this is sort of the problem. You loaded up the defense, and the defense is really good. And I think it will continue to play hard because outside of like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, they don't have a lot of guys that can sit there and rest on their laurels. They don't have a whole lot of guys that are making a ton of money. They have guys who need to prove themselves. They have a very young core on that side of the ball. But I agree with Lane's point. The other thing, just to throw it out there, because we keep talking about dancing around things that I like. I like what I'm seeing from Jamari Thrash. I'm not going to sit here and go, Jamari Thrash is your future number 2 receiver or anything. But in terms of if I'm trying to look at things that I'm sitting here going, I want to see more of this. Jamari Thrash is sort of in that bucket of things I want to see. Whereas Isaiah Bond, and I understand why they like him. I understand the speed. I understand all the things that he can potentially bring you. But potential is one of those things that can get you fired. Jamari Thrash is the one that I sit here and I always get a light taste of Jamari Thrash and go, I'd like to see more of this. So I'm hoping in 2 more weeks, after the bye week, that's one of the things that happens. And with Cedric Tillman back, that those things are things to build on, and they're less reliant on the unreliable. And, this is what I tried to caution people with Isaiah Bond. I tried. People told, he's the 3rd round pick. He would have been a 3rd round pick. He will drive you insane because he's really, really talented. And even as he drives us mad, there were still plays where I wish they would have gotten the ball to him because he's open down the field, and Dylan Gabriel was late or didn't see him or all these other things. So I lay out the things, and I'll be labeled as defending the regime or whatever. That's fine. But the thing I would say is you have to get those baby steps if you're going to see this thing grow, committing fewer penalties, getting more stability on the offensive line, and seeing these incremental improvements will hopefully get you to a point, whether it's Dylan Gabriel or eventually Shedeur Sanders, assuming he gets to where he needs to go, that when they do start going, it can actually be improving, as opposed to getting sort of a mirage of maybe they have one game against a team who's playing like crap or get a couple lucky plays, as opposed to laying foundation that you can sort of sit there and go, okay, we're getting to a point where this becomes more interesting to watch.
Right. Well, we have the bye week coming up here, and we aren't sure whether they're going to be sellers or stand pat or whatever they're going to do. They're going to probably continue to be opportunistic, if I know Andrew Berry. But Lane, do you see any changes coming during these 2 weeks? Maybe some readjustment on the coaching staff or anything like that? You think anybody gets tossed under the bus, or we just keep going?
I've heard nothing of that sense, and I would be surprised, 8 weeks in through the bye week. The one thing that Stefanski did say that they're going to do is that they are going to evaluate everything and look at everything and see what they can change, if changes are needed. Maybe you'll get some different from your maybe. I have a hard time seeing Stefanski giving up the plate. We'll do it a year ago also. It's difficult to say because right now the Browns are listeners when it comes to trade talks and trade discussions. It's obvious that they are looking for guys that younger veterans under controllable deals can have for a couple years and work in their system, which fits into what they want to do and what they like to do, acquiring talent, especially if they can get it on their stage where they feel it's a bargain for them. It's interesting that they picked up a couple tight ends today, especially with all the noise surrounding teams looking for tight ends, and David Njoku in his last season on his contract is something possible to shake out there. I would never say never. I'm not expecting it because Andrew Berry, he tends to negotiate and aim high, and things end up settling down. So it's going to be interesting to see here when we got this next week, because I went the deadline's the 4th or something like that. I would expect things to get a little bit noisier, but I'm not expecting much to happen.
Right. Let's go to some questions that we might be able to answer and help people over. Robert here gets right to the point. He asked if we think the Stefanski era in Cleveland is over. Is there any circumstance that you see, if the wheels fall completely off, if Jimmy Haslam is embarrassed by this team or whatever, that Stefanski doesn't get another year?
If you're asking me, look,
it's for you, Pete.
Anything's possible with this thing. I can only say that I hope not, because by virtue of, again, loading up on defense, you've sort of put Kevin Stefanski in this weird position where he's trying to fix it. And I understand the challenge he's sort of taken on. They're trying to get much younger in a very big hurry, all on the fly, which is a huge challenge. So, yeah, it's possible. The problem is, and I don't know who's in Jimmy Haslam's ear on this issue. I don't know how confident they are that they can hire a better coach. And I don't know how confident they are. And this goes beyond whatever lofty praise people think I have of Kevin Stefanski. I don't know what is out there that you're going to sit there and go, man, that's the guy I want. There is no Ben Johnson sitting out there that you can go get and be like, okay, problem solved. We're going to go get this guy. There's no Mike Vrabel out there. You are talking yourself into, the hot coordinator and, basically the Aaron Glenn type hire, which if your organization isn't very good, you're still going to be the Jets. Those things don't solve, those problems don't solve themselves just by switching out a coach. And yes, you can get a big shot of juice in terms of like energy and everything with Dan Campbell. But I think what people lose track of with Dan Campbell is that the ownership made a concerted effort from top to bottom to change everything about that organization. Dan Campbell is a very important piece of what's going on in Detroit, but they have done a lot to change that. So if you're one, the problems that the Browns are facing right now don't change with a new head coach. The other problem you run into is that unless you're prepared, unless Jimmy Haslam is prepared to take sort of a long look in terms of how he's doing everything and change those things from top to bottom, you're always going to have this lingering question. And I don't know what that is, because he may have already sort of done it by pronouncing that Deshaun Watson was a swing and a miss and then doubling down on it. Hopefully that's the end of those type of ventures, but you never know with him, because he gets competitive and he finds things he likes and he wants to do those things. So yes, Kevin Stefanski is vulnerable. Do I think that's a smart play? Not really. Does Jimmy Haslam think he can do better? It doesn't take a whole lot for billionaires to convince themselves they know the right answer.
Right. Lane, your thoughts on the situation with Kevin Stefanski and Jimmy Haslam, if your microphone will permit you.
Well, when we look at this situation with Kevin Stefanski, I believe the wheels do have to fall off the wagon for that potential dismissal. Nothing would surprise me, though, if this team just continues on the same path they are. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens at quarterback. I think that's going to play into this equation. I do believe that you're going to see another quarterback on the field here. I wouldn't say that your backup is tearing it up in practice, as some local media representative wants to spew. But your backup quarterback is going to have to play it in the equation, and the youth and development that we keep talking about. There's going to have to be evident at some point that the tide has turned. I think the pressure is going to be on Stefanski. I don't think that he's in a threatened position right now, or he doesn't feel threatened, because in the NFL, it's not for long. And players come and go, coaches come and go. Cleveland Browns have been abysmal over the last 25 games or so, and there has to be some kind of change. Investment has increased dramatically with what he's trying to achieve in building a new stadium and getting people to pay to come to that stadium, and it's going to be part of the equation at some point. And if you continue to lose as they do, you're not going to have the same coach. So there has to be a change, and this is going to be the biggest 8-9 weeks that we've seen in the Cleveland Browns in a couple years or so.
Well, they've set the bar pretty low so far, so improvement shouldn't be hard, theoretically. Question from Carlisle for you, Pete. He says, I got a question. What quarterback are you watching in college that fits Stefanski's offense best?
So this is always a fun question, because everybody thinks they know what Kevin Stefanski wants in a quarterback position, and they have no idea.
None.
Because Kevin Stefanski is extraordinarily open-minded when it comes to the quarterback position. And he likes a lot of different things. Now, what we just saw is what people will think the Browns want is guys like Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, and that's possible. But they also liked Jackson Dart. They also really liked Cam Ward. And you put all those guys in a room, they are completely different quarterbacks. Kevin Stefanski wants a guy he thinks can take him over the top. That's why part of the reason they went down the incredibly perilous and stupid road with Deshaun Watson, who's a completely different quarterback from Baker Mayfield. So there is no specific style of quarterback you go, man, that's a Kevin Stefanski style quarterback, because he's willing to work with just about anything. I think a lot of people will default, and I think I've already heard this from some people. Oh, he'll love Garrett Nussmeier. I'll bet he doesn't.
I bet he doesn't.
But that's the thing. He will be interested in guys who can operate from the pocket, can process, can operate on time, and then everything else sort of becomes about what he believes he can do with them. Big arm, sure, he'd like to have that. Mobility, that's a great bonus. It's not a requirement for him, but certainly something he'd like to have. So you start looking around, and there are a whole lot of quarterbacks. I can only tell you who's interesting to me right now. The guys who are interesting to me right now, the guys I'm looking at going, man, I'm not set on where I'm ranking these guys by any stretch, but guys who I just enjoy watching as I go through the process. Fernando from Indiana, Dante Moore, though I don't think he's going to come out this year from Oregon, is certainly an intriguing kid. I don't think the Browns are really serious about this, but everybody's going to look at Lenore Sellers because that's what they do. If somebody thinks they can be the next Josh Allen, they will pull the trigger. I'm not confident the Browns will believe that, but we'll see. In fact, the guy I think would be more likely to scratch that itch in this draft class, assuming it comes out and there's still a lot of football to be played, is from the other end of the state, is Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati, who's a really good athlete. The difference is between he and Lenore Sellers is he's playing good football, and the Bearcats are playing good football. Yep. They're sitting 7-1 in the Big 12 and undefeated in the conference. I don't know that the Browns will like him. I enjoy the hell out of watching Josh Hoover at TCU. He's just fun. He's got he will just throw the ball around and is interesting from that standpoint. So there are a lot. Like I'm wide open on this quarterback class, and I like Ty Simpson quite a bit as well. Yep. Ty Simpson, very good quarterback. The only thing that worries me, and this is something the Browns may or may not really care about because ultimately they could decide it's really important to them one year, not as important the next if they believe they can get the ability out of him. He hasn't played a ton of football. He's really smart. He's really accurate. He's done a lot of good things. He's playing really good football at Alabama, even though they didn't play great this past weekend. But Ty Simpson is the real deal to me in terms of what he can be. So those are the guys that jump out to me. I'll tell you right now, I don't see it. I don't think the Browns will see it with Carson Beck. I don't think – I already mentioned Lenore Sellers and I mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. I want nothing to do with any of these quarterbacks, but, stranger things have happened.
How about you, Lane? Who you watching at the college level, hoping that maybe we'll be talking about him next March and April?
It's going to be interesting because I'm with Pete here. I don't believe Moore is going to come out. I believe Simpson and Fernando Mendoza right now look like the two guys that are at the top of that pecking order. Things can change, especially when you start getting the input of teams on what they're seeing and what they like. It was nice to see Pete bring up the guy from Cincinnati. He's got some game to him. Can't say if the Browns will like him yet, but I'm intrigued. Of course, in TCU. But outside of that, the quarterback play is the 26 class that was supposed to be, head and shoulders above everything has been a disappointment. And we're seeing guys that weren't in that scope that are shown up being the guy who can play these games or have some versatility in what they do. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but usually on a Saturday, I'm sitting there rifling through game after game, and there may be 5 guys that intrigue me, and Pete's nailed probably 3 or 4 of them.
Right. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I enjoy watching football on Saturday a great deal myself, just watching the quarterbacks and seeing how they act. Let's get to a couple other questions real quick here. Pete, Alex Wright, I don't know if we know that they're going to extend him or not, but would you if you were?
Not this second. One, if you're somebody who's sitting there going, fire the GM and the coach, why are you extending him when he's a very specific fit? The other element, and I like what I'm seeing from Alex Wright. I think he's getting better these past couple of weeks. He and Isaiah McGuire do very similar things, which is valuable. It's giving Myles Garrett a break and the ability to sort of not be ground down on rundowns, that they can put those guys in, and Cam Thomas, who I hope the Browns keep around, who I really like.
He's done a good job.
But if I'm the Browns, I want to wait around and see if either Alex Wright or Isaiah McGuire can take another step forward as a pass rusher. They're they're okay, but right now they are primary run defenders. And, in terms of talking extension, you're not going to turn around and give an $80 million deal to Alex Wright. You know what I mean? It's going to be something along the lines of, I think Jack Duffin talked about extending it for 1 year, $6 million, which makes sense. But if you're Alex Wright, you're probably saying, I'm going to try to play out the rest of this year and see if I can improve my own situation. So it comes down to incentives. On the one hand, Alex Wright certainly wants to get a deal that's going to potentially pay him more than his entire rookie contract did. On the other hand, he doesn't want to take a low ball offer when he could wait to free agency and potentially get more money because defensive ends are just going to get paid. And there are systems where he can be really good. So I think you're probably waiting closer to December before they make a decision. And it could be they pick either Isaiah McGuire or Alex Wright to sort of look at as that guy. It could be both of them at sort of a modicum price. They could decide, hey, here's the deal we want to give. Which one of you wants to take it because you fill this role for us really well? But a lot of this depends on, are these guys going to be around next year? Because then Alex Wright becomes a completely different, as we just talked about. If the Browns are running a completely different system that doesn't make any sense to Alex Wright, why are they extending him? So this is the problem you run into when when everybody throws out the specter of, well, let's replace everybody. You're not going to do these type of deals. You're going to wait and see what happens.
Right. One more question that we'll try to get to here before the gang separates. This one from Search MDC, Lane. I'm going to throw this one at you. He says, are we just looking to get the team right by the new stadium opening, basically aiming for 3 years from now instead of now? Do you think that Jimmy Haslam has that sort of patience, Lane?
Well, it was never now when we're talking about the 2025 season. It was obvious, evident. They made a point of it that they intended on being competitive. They wanted to be competitive, but they wanted to grow and develop. And the roster tells you that when you have, 13, 14 rookies and you got undrafted free agents, that's what you're looking to do. You're looking for growth, development, fill in. I don't believe there's a 3-year plan. I believe that they want to be competitive this year. They expect to be a solid threat next year, not for anything other than maybe division, a playoff type caliber situation. The year after that is when this team should be good. And that's the big thing. It should be good.
Right.
Next year, they should be a competitive outfit. This year, you're playing to get to be competitive. And you can see that then when you watch them, they can be competitive for a half. Or they can be competitive for 6 series. The competitive nature increases. It's just that the abnormal inefficiency of an offense generates that defense down, so those games don't look as competitive as what they really were until a certain time position in the game. So things are getting better, even though score doesn't indicate it. But you have so much work to do on the offensive side of the ball that it screams improvement. It screams help. And that has to happen throughout the rest of this season and this offseason to supplement and complement them, to complement this defense so it becomes a competitive team rather than a good or a very good defense just being exposed, being on the field, being stuck in bad field position situations. There's a lot of things that go into it, but 3 years, no. If this team isn't competitive on that doorstep of winning meaningful games or opportunities or playoff things, then it'll be a monumental failure.
So there's a lot here. So bear with me. This is the problem we run into with media and fans versus how the teams think. Media and fans want to see a standard progression. They won 3 games, so now they have to win 7. So then they can win 11. Like, that's how they were. The Browns clearly don't think that way. And if you want to take a super cynical approach, they loaded up on the defensive side of the ball knowing they were not going to be very good because that presents them the ability to be fighting, but still bad enough to get really nice draft picks and to be able to get the guys they want to then build on the offensive side of the ball and then all of a sudden make that big jump. Because the Browns aren't trying to go, well, we're trying to get to 9-8 so we can keep our job. There are plenty of people who do that, and I understand why it works that way, because if you're in Tennessee, you better get to 9-8 real quick or you're going to get fired, for example. Mm-hmm. But the Browns aren't thinking like that, for better or worse. And there are people who laugh, well, how could they possibly be thinking anything else? Browns are thinking Super Bowl, as they should. And you can laugh at that, and you can say the Browns are stupid because they've been so bad for so long, but they have the eyes on the prize. So let's use the 3-year timeline. 3 years from now, the Browns expect 2 things. They expect to have the quarterback, and they expect to be good. So when that stadium opens up, they are good and ready to go, whatever that entails. And if the Browns can get what they want, and God knows if they can or not, but this is what they're thinking. If we can get through this year, we're going to load up on the offensive side of the ball and start making real leaps. And then in 3 years, when they open up the new stadium, they're thinking or aspiring to be able to go. We're not just talking about making the playoffs. We're talking about making a run in the playoffs. You can laugh at that. You can say that's unrealistic. God knows ATI, I have to answer these questions on how can you possibly expect blah, blah, blah. And I get it. But that's the way they're thinking. And if they can pull it off, it's going to be impressive. But it's a big ask. And they don't have much credibility on this front given recent success.
Yeah, it's really tough after 25 years of struggle. Go back to 95 when we lost the team, to ask fans to continue to have patience, right? And so there's not a lot of patience. And I completely sympathize with the fans on our forums who have just run out of patience for this team. But it does appear to be somewhat of an objective to the meandering. And hopefully folks will hang out with us during that time as we look forward to the draft and free agency and all that this year. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, there is a QR code with a duck in the middle of it. The QR code will lead you to the subscription page of the OBR. And the subscription page of the OBR will get you into premium forums, premium articles, and coming very soon, premium videos as well. That we sort of reserve some of the good stuff for the premium videos and the premium forums and all that sort of stuff. We make it special, I hope, for our subscribers. And it's due to our subscribers that the OBR has been able to be around for 25 years. So if you want to support the free work that we do, all the work that we do here, please take a look at that QR code on your phone or your computer or whatever. Jump to the subscription page and consider joining the OBR VIP service. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it, as always. Interesting discussion. We will be here again during the bye week next Monday to talk about any news that's happened and talk about the second half of the season here on Gang of Three. So thanks for hanging out with us. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Later.